Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. My name is Jedley, and I want to welcome you to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very happy and so honored that you'll join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. How do we do that? By sharing fun, thoughtful, thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to write books for kids of all ages. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show and let them know that they can hear us on the AM/FM 24/7 network and find us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. We have two amazing guests for you today. Jay Miletsky will be here to talk to us about the business of books, in particular the business of self-publishing and indie publishing books. And then a little bit later on in the show, Larry Daley will be here to tell us about his exciting new project called Float.
You've heard the whispers. You've seen it on TV. You may have even seen the movie. Now it's time to bring Dungeons and Dragons directly to you with D&D for Hire!
More than just a game, D&D lets you step into the role of a hero you create and guide them on fantastical adventures with your friends. Perfect for beginners and experts alike, D&D for Hire is sure to delight and entertain your kids for weeks on end.
Such a fun game. There are endless possibilities. There's so many things that you can do. It's so much fun.
Our son Eli loves D&D. It's like his favorite thing to do all week.
I was like 15 when I joined. I'm 21 now. There are people who are in our party, really learn to come out of their shells.
Whether you're near or far, whether you're looking for a birthday party or a campaign to keep you adventuring for years to come, D&D for Hire has you covered. Learn more at dndforhire.com. That's dndforhire.com. D&D for Hire, bringing the adventure to you. D&D for Hire runs games digitally over Zoom or in person in select areas.
This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Missing Red Envelopes, a fun middle grade novel by our friend Yobi Q. As the Lunar New Year approaches, two Asian American girls from New York City eagerly anticipate the festive celebrations. From watching the vibrant parade to indulging in delicious Asian cuisine and cherishing precious family moments. The highlight of the occasion is receiving lucky red envelopes filled with surprises from their relatives. However, excitement turns to mystery when Weena realizes she's lost all of the red envelopes. What in the world will they do? Encourage readers to dive into the story, celebrate cultural diversity, and enjoy a heartwarming adventure with The Missing Red Envelopes by our friend Yobi Q. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Lucas and the Game of Chance, a thrilling middle grade novel written by Anthony L. Mena. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. While Lucas is playing his flute at the seawall one day, he befriends a mysterious talking dancing snake that rewards him with fortune and favor. Some years later, tempted by greed and pride, Lucas loses all of his riches and his family. He now must set off on a treacherous journey through a frightening forest filled with suspense and strange creatures. To find Destiny, her son, Ilion, the sun, her daughter, Luna, the moon. These celestial guardians will surely allow him to reverse his misfortune, restore his honor, and win back all that he loves and treasures. Won't they? This is a reimagined Greek folk tale, Lucas in the Game of Chance. It's illuminated with dramatic and evocative pen and ink drawings that provide an ideal backdrop for the dark intrigue that fills this haunting story of human struggle, courage, and resilience. You and your kids are going to love it. Lucas and the Game of Chance by Anthony L. Mena. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. Join us right now from the beautiful Garden State of New Jersey. Our guest is here today to celebrate self-publishing and how wonderful it can be to get your voice out there and get your books into the hands of kids. Please welcome to the show the author of The Great Letter Rebellion, Jay Miletsky. Jay, how are you?
I'm great, Jay. How you doing?
I am wonderful. I've been following Jay for probably for as long as I've been doing the podcast here. You really are quite successful in this field of self-publishing.
Successful, lucky, whichever word you want to pick. It's worked out well for me, and I actually really do enjoy it quite a bit.
Well, I am a firm believer that, yes, there are some people in this world that are lucky, but most of those lucky people are people who put in the work.
Yeah, you're right. I think a lot of people seem to think that writing a book or self-publishing a book is just about writing it. Your dog does something cute, you're going to write a story about it, and everyone's going to fall in love with it, and that's the end of it. But it's a grind. It is a lot of work to be successful in this industry. And one of the things that I try to do as often as I can is make sure people understand before they invest their first dollar, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon, and it is a lot of hard work and a lot of making the right decisions. And any one wrong decision can send you off into a path where this is a very big money pit.
Yeah. That's what I want to talk about. We do have a lot of authors and aspiring authors out here. And I think just about any parent that's reading with their kids every night and coming up with stories, in the back of their mind, they might think, well, my kid really likes this. Maybe I can do this writing thing. One of the things that we've really stressed and emphasized here on the podcast is that when you launch that book, you are launching a small business. And if you don't think that way, no one's going to read your book.
Yeah, 100%. This is, you can't, if you're going to be doing indie authoring, if you're going to be doing indie publishing, you have to recognize that you're not an author, you're an entrepreneur. You're a publishing company owner. And you have to think that way. You have to make sure that your investment is safeguarded. You're talking about this is real money. It's real money to put out there for an illustrator, for websites, and to print books, to ship books. You've got to find sales avenues. The writing is one part of it, but it's not the biggest part. Yeah. It's one part, and you have to have everything else put together as well.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit before we get into specifics and numbers. Can you share a little bit about your success, the success that you've had with your books?
Yeah, I actually started this about. I actually started writing when I graduated from college. I wrote 12 business books for Pearson Education as well as Cengage Learning. All 300 pages or more. I didn't enjoy writing any of them because it was a grind of writing these very large books that were obsolete within 6 months after they became published. And so that wasn't a lot of fun. I took a little bit of time off of writing. I had my daughter about 12 years ago, and we decided to, and I would read to her every night. And as I would read to her, I started thinking of my own stories, much like a lot of other parents do as well. And my daughter has cerebral palsy, so she can't walk or talk. And I started looking into other books that were out there for and about kids with special needs. And I didn't really like a lot of what I found. What I discovered was that most of the books that were out there were unrelatable to kids that were developmentally typical. And they were very depressing for parents of kids that had developmental difficulties. They were just they seemed more like they were emotional outcries from parents who just needed some sort of a release, and I understand that. But it doesn't necessarily make for a very good book. So I started thinking about how can I put something together that everybody could relate to. And I came up with this idea of, instead of putting a child in a wheelchair on the cover of a book and just being very heavy-handed about the messaging, let's start doing something in a more metaphoric sort of way. So I created this character of Ricky the Rock. And I thought of 14 different rock friends that could all roll around their hill because they were round. But Ricky couldn't because he was flat on one side. And as I put that together, I started creating basically her story, where we try one thing after another, and nothing really works until you finally find some therapies, some ways of doing things that help you make some progress. So in the story, Ricky can't walk because he's flat on one side, and the rocks all try one thing after another until finally they come up with a way to help him to roll. And most people have no idea what the book is actually about. Most people think it's a book about friendship and perseverance, which it is by design. But the few people that it does relate to on a more personal level, I get emails every week from people saying, I don't know if you meant this, but my child has a developmental difficulty. They can't walk or whatever. And this really meant a lot to us. And that's exactly what I meant by it. I meant for only a few people to understand it. And I think that was really the key to that book being as successful as it was, because it's relatable to everybody. It's got very basic messages of kindness and teamwork and perseverance, but it's kind of like hiding the peas in the mashed potatoes. It's got something in there that's a little bit deeper if you want it to be. Because I looked at it like a business. I recognize that my story isn't one that most people could relate to. How do I create this story in a way that is acceptable for the mass public? And that really ended up working. And then I looked into the best way to do things. I did get a traditional publisher interested. I said no to them, recognizing that I could make 45 cents going traditional or $4.50 per book, doing it on my own. I looked into all of the traditional ways of doing it indie, which is, Ingram Spark or Amazon KDP or BookBaby or any one of the number of vanity presses that are out there. The numbers didn't add up. Again, looking at it as a business, the numbers have to add up to me. And they didn't. There was no way that I could make a profit. So I figured out that printing in China is the only viable way of making money in book publishing. You want to do mass printing, which is the way to go. And unfortunately, U.S. printers simply just charge too much, and the quality isn't as good. So I found a printer in China, and I had my books shipped back to the U.S. I joined the Amazon Advantage platform, which of all the platforms is the best one for generating a profit. I took the money that I made from that book and I invested it into larger print runs of Ricky, so I was able to make a larger margin. And I also invested it into more titles. The more titles we have, the more titles I sell. And that's basically how I've grown.
And you've sold a ton of books.
Yeah, I've kind of lost count, but I'm pretty sure that overall, for all 12 children's book titles that we have now, we're probably over the 600,000 unit mark. With Ricky being probably 400,000 of that, Patrick Picklebottom being another 100,000, and the rest of them being made up of the other titles.
There's so much to talk about there. First off, I think it's genius in terms of the story, to talk about your family situation through this metaphor, something that everybody can kind of relate to on a number of different levels. Lots of authors come on and say, I wrote a book about bullying because my kid was bullied, and it's basically the story. My kid went to school and she got bullied, and yes, it makes your kid feel great, and there are certain kids going to get a message out of that, but probably not a lot, because probably a lot of parents are going to pick up the book and go, not something I want to deal with right now.
Well, yeah, it's here's the thing. It's the first rule of writing a book that's going to sell is making it fun. Barry the Bully Who Learned to Be Kind is not a fun book. Nobody's going to want to read that once, much less twice. You want to have a book in your shelf that kids like repetition. And when a kid likes a book, he wants to read that book 2 or 3 times a night and every night for the next month. That's an indication of a good book, of a book that a kid wants to read it over and over and over again. And they get to know the characters and they love the characters. So the first thing you have to put into it is an element of fun, interesting characters, a plot line that keeps the kids engaged, something that's going to make them care about the story. Have a good resolution that makes them feel good about it. You look at Ricky the Rock, and there's Ricky. We introduce you to all the characters, and then I spend most of the book punishing Ricky. We try one thing after another, and nothing is working. And until it finally gets to a point where he's just sitting there looking just sad, and the reader doesn't want him to be punished anymore. So then I give them the good resolution that makes them feel really good. And I get to when I'm doing my assemblies and I'm reading to 600-700 kids, and I get to the part that says Ricky the Rock rolled, they all start cheering. That shows an emotional investment. That's a book that kids will want to read over and over and over again. And that's the key. The message is fine. The message is great on the back burner. Nothing wrong with having a message in there, but the message shouldn't lead the story. The story has to lead the story.
Yeah. So somebody listening out there who has this great idea, and they've listened to you, and they listen that you've been very successful, but you've kind of emphasized that this is a business and it takes a lot of work, and they might be sitting now saying, I don't want to put that work in. What would you say to that person? Then
don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I would love to I would love to play quarterback for the Jets, which I actually probably am capable of doing, considering, all their past quarterbacks. But, the reality is, in order to do that, at any point in time, that takes a lot of work. You're working out, you're practicing, you're doing a lot of things. You don't just wake up one day and say, I want to be quarterback for the Jets, and you just go and become that. I was never interested in putting that kind of work in for that particular job. So I didn't do it. If you really want to become successful in publishing, but you don't want to put the work in, don't do it.
Right.
I get authors all the time who tell me, who ask me, how do I get my books onto the shelves of Barnes & Noble? And my answer is, you don't. Plain and simple, you don't. Go to a beach and pick up a handful of sand, right? That handful of sand represents all the books that are in Barnes & Noble. Now, look over your hand at the beach. All the rest of the sand represent all the authors who want to get into the shelves of Barnes & Noble but can't, right? If that's your goal, it's most likely not going to work, especially if you think it's going to happen after your first book. It's not. You write a book, you find the areas where you can control sales. School visits, street fairs, your own site, Amazon. You focus on those. You make a profit, and you parlay that profit into more titles and larger printings. Then, when you have a library of books, maybe you might be able to get a distributor who can get your books onto a shelf of Barnes & Noble or Target. My books are on shelves of Target and Barnes & Noble across the country, but it took me 4 years to do that.
Yeah.
And even now, it was a huge long shot.
Yeah. And, I really appreciate the fact that analogy of being on the beach. We've said it here on the podcast. There are literally thousands of books being published, not every single year, every single month.
Yeah. I mean, I have a group on Facebook. It's got 85,000 people in it. That's 85,000 authors who all want to publish books. And every single one of them would love to be on the shelves of Barnes & Noble. At least they think they would. Most people don't realize what that actually entails. But it doesn't happen by magic. There's a lot of elements that go into it. Barnes & Noble picks the best of the best of the best, not necessarily just in terms of the quality of the story. Sometimes that's of course part of it. It's quality of the story, it's quality of the writing, it's quality of the editing, of the illustrations, the quality of the printing. If you're looking for a cheap printer or a cheap illustrator, you're not going to get on those shelves. It doesn't happen that way. They're looking for the best of the best of the best. And that takes a while. And they're also looking for someone that has a marketing budget that can help them bring clients into their stores. They're looking for someone who's got a growing library. So if your first book does well, then you'll have more books to give them next year. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's not just I wrote a story about my dog, I want it on the shelf of Barnes & Noble. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. And going back to your dream of being the quarterback for the Jets, although that seems like a really dangerous dream to have these days, that journey starts back in Pop Warner for most athletes. So you're talking about years-long effort. And you mentioned you looked at you looked at traditional publishing and you said, no, it's a 45-cent return for every book I sell, and I don't want to do that. And you looked at the vanity presses or some of the some of the self-publishing companies that will help you get your own book, and you said that it was too much money. You couldn't make a profit doing that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I understand that most people who are writing books, there's a certain mindset, and they are they're writing because either they're bored or they're looking for something to do in their life that might be missing. For some people, it's the only way into any sort of fame or notoriety, or they just feel like they've got a story that's very important they want to tell. But at heart, they're storytellers, they're writers, and they don't recognize that their best friend is really Excel. A spreadsheet to show what all of what all of your costs and all of your expenses and all of your revenue is going to be, right? So you have to look at that. We're in an industry that there is a cap on what people will spend. Okay, for a hardcover children's book, it's $18.95. Maybe you can get it at $19.95, but for the most part, the market will bear an $18.95 cover price. So you can't go in and charge $35, $50 for a book, right? If you're manufacturing toasters, that's a different story. I've seen toasters for sale for $20. I've seen toasters for sale for $1,000 that connect to your phone and do all sorts of weird things, and all across the board. Books aren't like that. There is a cap. So if I produce my book for $0 and I sell it for $18.95, the most that I can make is $18.95. But of course, I've got costs, right? How much is it going to cost me to print my book and ship it? Right? There's that cost, my cost of goods sold. How much is it going to cost me to market my book? How much is it going to cost me to ship my book to a client? Right? How much is it going to cost me for an illustrator, for an editor? I've got a bunch of costs, and that all comes from that $18.95 price tag. And if I sell it at a discount, when I'm getting my revenue is even less. So I need to figure out how can I minimize all my expenses while at the same time not sacrificing quality, right? That's the path that you take, and the difference is what your profit is, and that's the way you're going to make money. And recognize that your first run, you're not going to make a lot of money. Most people go into a first run of books, maybe 1,000, 2,000 books at the most, right? You look at the spreadsheet for how much it costs you for Ingram Spark, and for Book Baby and all that. The numbers don't make sense. You look at let's look at Ingram Spark, for example. Ingram Spark for a hardcover children's book is going to cost you about $9, right? Now you want to sell it to a store, you want to sell retail. Your book is $18.95. Let's sell it at $19. You're only making $9.50. The store wants to take 50% off that cover price. So if you're making $9.50, you're paying $9 for the actual book. That's only 50-cent difference. You still have to ship the book to them. Your 50 cents is gone. You haven't marketed your book yet. You're losing money in almost every sale. Mm-hmm. So how do you make money? By either, in that scenario, you either tell the stores you're only taking 30% off the cover price, in which case the bookstores are going to say, well, no, thank you. We've got a million other books that'll give us 50% off. Or you say, I'm going to raise my cover price to $25. The bookstores, again, are going to say, no, thank you. We've got a million books that will sell for $19, right? And we want books to sell. We don't want them sitting on our shelf. So it's not a way to do any sales, not a way to make any money. And Book Baby and Lulu, all those POD companies are the same story. Any of the vanity presses, it's the same story. The math doesn't add up. So you have to look at what are the alternatives. It's printing in bulk and making an investment, taking a risk. You're running a business. No business comes without risk. Right? And that risk means that your potential reward can be higher, but it's going to take a little while. My first print run was 3,500 units. Right? I make a little bit of profit on that, but not a lot, but a little bit. Enough that gets me encouraged that when I sell the books, I then do a print run of 5,000. Then I'm making a little bit more. Then, after a couple of years, I'm now printing 20,000 at a time. At 20,000, my cost per unit to print is much, much lower. Now I'm making real money. But again, it doesn't happen overnight.
Right. And I know that there are a lot of companies out there that'll say, you don't need the spreadsheet. You don't need to find an illustrator. You give us X amount of dollars. We're going to give you this many books. A lot of times I've looked at those numbers and I'm like, if you sold every single one of those books at $20, you won't add up to what you have to put out.
Correct. And in my group, the group that I run on Facebook, once in a while, I have a rule that you're not allowed to prop up vanity presses. And if you do, you better be expecting for me to challenge you on it. So when I see people who will talk about their, Zillibris or Author House or whatever, as a great vanity press, I will always reply back saying, show me the numbers, show me the math. I want to see math that shows that this is a viable way to making a profit. And they'll never ever show me the math because it doesn't work. And typically after going back and forth a few times, the response will be, well, my goal wasn't to make money. My goal was to get my story out there. Okay, that's fine. But let's say that from the beginning, right? Because this is not, what you're now admitting is that this is not a way to make money. There's nothing wrong with writing books as a hobby. That's a great endeavor. You want to write it as a hobby. You want to write books to give to your family and friends and to check off a box that on your bucket list that I accomplish this. Awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everything has to be a business. But if you want to be a business, then you have to make a profit. And in an industry where there is a cap on how much money you can earn from a cover price, you've got to keep your costs low. And the vanity presses, the hybrid presses, the math doesn't work out.
Yeah. And the same thing too. If you could just talk a little bit about we help authors promote their books. We have some paid promotional services here. We try to keep them at a very, very low cost. I hear of people going and spending thousands of dollars for publicists or advertising. And again, it's like, how can you make any money putting that kind of investment in?
Yeah, it's tough. You can't. I mean, if you're a James Patterson, that's one thing. If you're a Dean Koontz, that's one thing. But if you are one of the millions of people that are trying to make money in publishing, which you can. I don't want to dissuade anybody. You can make money in publishing. This can be a very lucrative sort of industry. You need to find the avenues where you can do some marketing that will reach a respectable audience without having to spend a lot of money on it. You might be able to do it without spending any money at all. You might be able to find some influencers that are willing to read your book on YouTube, whatever else. But there are places like you, for example, that will do some promotion without charging an arm and a leg. And you have to look over all these opportunities and recognize what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I think for a lot of people in publishing, one of the reasons why so many vanity presses pull people in is because they call themselves publishers. But they're not really publishers, right? They are publishing services deceptively using the word publishers because they know it's an emotional end that everyone wants a publisher. What you're really doing is you're paying $5-10 grand for the right to tell your friends and family, I've got a publisher. My publisher told me, but they're not really publishers, right? Along with that, people love the idea of book launches and pre-sales. And they love the idea of having a publicist, right? Because you see that on TV. You see that, in movies where an author's got a publicist, right? So you'll pay $3 or $4 grand a month for a publicist who gets you a couple of small things, but not nearly enough. I mean, when you look at it, you get a publicist for $3,000 a month. How many books do you need to sell to cover $3,000? Is that publicist going to get you enough coverage? Probably not. You got to find ways to make it work. Now, once you get to a point later on where you have a distributor that is getting your book into Barnes & Nobles and Target, then a publicist starts to make more sense, right? Then you can get a higher priced PR person because you're gonna get your book in front of the buyers at the Barnes & Nobles and Target who are going to help make those decisions, and they'll be able to buy your book from your distributor. That makes a little more sense. When you are selling through schools, street fairs, Amazon, and your own site, you have to look for avenues that are affordable. Mm-hmm. And you got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Jay, we've covered a whole lot, and one of the things that you've kind of repeated over and over is the numbers. I know there are people out there that, again, it's like, I'm an author, I'm an artist. And, my daughter is in the music business, and she says the same thing. You have to be an entrepreneur. You have to think like a business person if you want your art to reach, whether it's a book, whether it's visual art, whether it's music. You have to think like an entrepreneur, or you're going to be taken advantage of.
Absolutely. And there's no shortage of people who will try to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed in surfing through different groups on Facebook, in any group, people will ask, how do I publish my book? Right? It's an open-ended question that there's no answer for that. The only way to respond to that in any kind of meaningful way is to ask, what are your goals? Because how you publish your book depends on what your goals are. There are multiple avenues. Every avenue has a different destination, right? If your goal is just to check a box that I did this, then this is your avenue. If you want to make money, this is your avenue. There are different reasons to publish. And ultimately, I'll see 100 or so people who will comment on that post, and every one of them is wrong, and a lot of them will give bad advice. A lot of them will say you simply can't make money in publishing. And I try to jump in and tell people, look, the people who say you can't make money in publishing are the people who can't make money in publishing, right? And it's easier to just say that than to figure out the right way. Mm-hmm. What I've noticed is that not having any success in this industry has never stopped anybody from giving bad advice. It's kind of amazing to me that how many people are ready to give advice, even you haven't sold any books yet.
Right.
Take some time to learn. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room. It's better to be the person that wants to learn. But at the very basics, at the very foundation, you need to know your numbers. You need to think from a business standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay, I know, too, before I ask for your Facebook group and your website, I understand that you're going to be part of a great conference coming up in the summertime in Kansas City. Can you give us a little idea about what's going on?
Yeah, I can give you very little about that. So, because we're not ready to announce too much of it yet. But yeah, it's actually a summit that I run at TOC Productions. And basically the idea is every year for the last 3 or 4 years now, we have run a summit. The first one we ran in New York City. We had some speakers, myself included. We had 24 people who came and had a great time. The year after that, we did it in Vegas, where we had about 45 people who showed up, a better crop of speakers, also a really good time. And we had probably 40 people who joined virtually. Last summer, we did it in Nashville, had about 90 people who showed up, another 90 virtual. The speakers were outstanding. It was a whole weekend full of events on Friday night. Saturday, we had a full main event. Sunday morning, we had a brunch event. Another 100 or so people joined us virtually. This year, we're doing it in Kansas City. I got to tell you, I can't say the names of people who are going to be there in terms of speakers, but we have some people that even like an SCBWI coordinator would be like, holy crap, that's a good slate of speakers. We got some names that are very recognizable, talking about topics and subjects that every indie author is going to benefit from. It's going to be a wild weekend.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more from you, because we only just scratched the surface here, where can they go to connect with you?
You can look at, I do have a company called the IAPC. You can go to iapcbooks.com. That's probably the best place to find, because that talks a lot about the business of publishing and all that. We can get prices for books. I'm trying to find out the name of my own group while we're talking here. It's children's book authors and illustrators, publishing, marketing, and something else. I can't see it. But yeah, so join our Facebook. It's got the image on the cover has 2 shelves of books and about 85,000 members, so you can't miss it.
And if I'm a member of the group, so if you are connected with me on Facebook, just see who I'm connected with, and you'll find it. It's right up there. I don't often contribute because I like to learn, and I don't like to say stuff when I don't know what I'm talking about. So this has been a blast, Jay. I hope we have a chance to have you come back on. I want to encourage everybody to check out your books and check out your website. And I want to thank you for being with us.
I appreciate it. Thanks. This has been a lot of fun. And anytime you want me on, just let me know.
All right. Our guest has been Jay Miletsky. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Books by Robert Provan, Sammy and Scarlett's Mangrove Adventure, and Sammy and Scarlett's Coral Reef Adventure. The first book in the series, Mangrove Adventure, recounts the tale of 2 young fish who live in a tidal pool in the Florida Keys. Sammy is a sergeant major fish, and Scarlett is a yellow-tailed snapper. They are different species from one another, and they don't look anything alike. But despite this, they become best of friends. They learn that it's not the color of the fish's scales that matters, but rather whether or not they have a loving heart. Sammy and Scarlett's Coral Reef Adventure is the second book in the series and tells the story of Sammy and Scarlett's continuing journey from the shelter of the mangrove forest in search of their adult home on the coral reef. The 2 fish are befriended along the way by Howie, the hawkbill sea turtle, who helps them through the dangers they will face ahead. Together, the 3 explore the amazing underwater city that is a coral reef. You and your family are going to love these books. Check them out today. The Books by Robert Provan. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Facing the Beast Within, written by New York Times best-selling author Mark Cheverton. Cameron Poole has a problem, a big problem. He's a bully magnet who struggles with anxiety. Being the smallest 6th grader at his summer camp, everything around him triggers his anxiety, his beast, making it impossible for him to do the same things other kids can do. In a constant state of worry, Cameron feels like a perpetual failure. That's bad enough. But when Cameron learns that mythical monsters are trying to invade his camp, things go from bad to worse. You and your kids are going to love this exciting middle grade novel. It belongs in your family library. You're going to love it. Facing the Beast Within, written by Mark Cheverton. Join us right now from not too far away from our studios here in beautiful Reedville. Our guest is coming to us from the coast of New Hampshire. He is here to celebrate his debut picture book and the Kickstarter campaign to get it out into the world. Please welcome to the show author and illustrator Larry Daley. Hey, Larry, how are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me here, Jeffrey. Appreciate it.
Delighted to have you on. I want to talk about Float, and I'm really excited about it, but first, this is your debut picture book in terms of you being the author and the illustrator, but in terms of being a creative for kids media, you're a very experienced veteran in that field.
I have been really lucky in that most of my career has been with DC Comics. So I've been in the world of superheroes, working both with DC and Warner Brothers. A lot of my job was taking characters like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and helping other clients take those characters into their own world. So I've had the chance to work on toys, video games. I've worked on projects in television and some of the movies. I really felt like the luckiest person in the world because I really got to play in all kinds of areas and help people get excited about those characters. So I couldn't have been happier with that experience because I think it gave me a chance to work with so many writers and artists myself. It gave me a real education on the hard work that goes into that.
Yeah. One of the things that kind of fascinated me and blew me away, we had the creative director for the Archie comic series, which has kind of morphed, and I didn't realize it, into all TV shows and other comics and things that I didn't even know were related to Archie.
Right.
And so I guess part of the challenge for the folks who are controlling an intellectual property like Batman and licensing it out is to make sure that what other people want to do with the character fits with what you all want to do with the character.
Yeah, it's a great point to bring up. I think people get very excited to play in these worlds, particularly Batman. But everybody comes with a different level of understanding of what that world is about. And my job was to, I think, provide them some context in terms of connecting what they wanted to do with it, with understanding the fans and giving them a better understanding of what the characters can and can't do. When you're talking about Batman, the use of a gun is not going to be something that is going to play well in any of those worlds because this is part of his lore in terms of how he became Batman. Mm-hmm. You can't put pink underwear on Superman because that's not part of the brand. And I think what I learned is that you're talking about characters that are over 80 years old. Mm-hmm. And you're dealing with so many different generations that are bringing their love and their interest to that it gave me an incredible appreciation for how enduring those brands are. There are so many characters and intellectual properties out there that don't survive, but the ones that do, there's a reason why they do. There's a fundamental love that we have of them that seems to cross generations, and I love that. I think I really respected, even in picture books, characters that seem to last the test of time. We're tapping into fundamental things that are just so important to us, not only as storytellers, but things that tap into our own world. So,
did you get a sense of what's the secret sauce that allows a Batman or Superman to last and have that love go from one generation to another, where, as you said, other characters kind of come and go?
I think with characters like Batman and Superman, there are enduring traits that we can recognize in ourselves, and they are such flexible ideas. Batman is a character that is a little different than Superman in that they represent different sides of perhaps who we want to be or what we feel are the best values of ourselves. But they are not a SpongeBob SquarePants where they have to look a particular way. They don't have to have the same voice, and they can be reinterpreted again and again in different ways. And I think the best characters have that durability where inherently they stay as what they are, but they have the ability to go in so many different directions.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the Batman TV show, that's a very different Batman version than some of the Batman versions we've seen today in the movies. And I think it's just a testament to how much flexibility there is in sharing stories using those characters.
Yeah. Well, let's get into your story, the story that you want to get out into the world in your picture book, Float.
Super. This is, as you mentioned, my debut picture book, and it's an important theme to me. On the surface, Float is a humorous story about a little girl who causes some mayhem inside an aquarium when a seagull steals her lunchbox. But underneath the surface of that, it's really a story about learning to stay calm when unexpected things happen. And I think this is a message that not only kids, but parents can probably appreciate. Some of my favorite picture books are stories that have a bit of chaos in them. I think that taps into my artistic style. And I think that chaos can be very relatable as a parent. But I think when chaos in real life happens, that's a bit harder to navigate. And I think when we can teach kids to learn how to navigate unexpected moments that may come up, that's a service we're doing them that will last them a lifetime. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that we can tell a story about sharing the reality with kids that, life is bumpy and things do happen, and we are doing ourselves a real service when we can navigate our way through those things in a way that allows us to find the positives out of a negative. And I think that's some of the themes that we were trying to get out of this book.
We've talked about this in different ways on the podcast many times. I've mentioned that my amazing daughter, from a very young age, her and I, when we would travel, she would tour with me a lot when I would do my educational magic shows. And when you're traveling around the country, driving thousands and thousands of miles in different areas and rural areas and urban areas and whatnot, you run into bumps along the road. And I've always had the personality, and she was either born with it or learned it, to, when you're in that situation, when you're hitting a bump or a big pothole in the road of life, to be able to sit back and say, this is going to make a good story someday, as opposed to freaking out. Do you think that is something that we can teach our kids through a story like Float?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I am not that parent. I think I have 3 kids of my own, and I think it's been a humbling experience because when bumps happen, I tend to be someone who wants to problem solve, and sometimes that's not always the solution. Sometimes it takes just listening. Sometimes it takes working through those emotions and then coming out the other side. I think this book has been important to me because it's a reflection on learning the importance to float when the waters get rough, and to recognize that emotions are important. They're important to express, and I'm not sure it's something that's inherent to certain people and something that needs to be learned with others. But I think reminding everybody that overreacting tends to not solve the problem is valuable. And I think it's easy to react. I think it's harder to appreciate that staying calm in the moment can actually provide more solutions than we appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we mentioned that this is not out there yet. The float has not been published, and you want to do what a lot of authors are doing is in terms of crowdfunding, getting the public involved instead of going to this giant corporation that you've been working with very successfully, much more successful than I am having with this sentence at the moment. But, you've been part of that big corporate publishing creative world, but you're choosing to go the crowdfunding route with Float. First off, why did you make that choice as opposed to trying to go out and knock on doors and get a big corporation to buy into this?
I was really lucky to meet a woman named Becky Garish, and she just started a publishing company called Bookling Media. And what I loved instantly in talking with Becky is that she was trying to provide a third option for artists and authors that are out there. It comes with a lot of challenges and compromises when you go after, where are we at this point? The big four, big five publishers out there. And when the other option is to self-publish, Becky's putting out there a third option. And that is that she works with people that are very interested in getting their stories out there. But she licensed the right to the story so that the creators get to keep the rights to the property. And this isn't something that exists in picture books that I'm aware of right now. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, being in the high-end corporate side of things, there are a lot of cooks in that kitchen, which means that everybody has a stake in what that story is going to be about and what they're going after. And sometimes when you work with a partner like Bookling Media that's really dedicated to just putting out the story you want to put out, there is no better partnership than that. For us, Becky has put forth an opportunity to get people in the community excited about this story and a part of the process as we go through making it. And I think getting that investment from people who are interested in seeing a story like this is incredibly valuable. I couldn't be more excited about this because I just think that the picture book industry and possibly the book industry in general needs a company like this that's out there because it's an advocate for getting all those stories that just can't get past an agent and get into those big publishers. I couldn't be more excited about exploring this as an opportunity. Now, that said, Kickstarter is a whole new experience for me, and it's been quite an education to understand the marketing side of that. But I will say that any aspiring writer or illustrator that doesn't learn marketing is not doing themselves a service, because that is equally, if not more important. And I think doing that on the front end gives us a real head start on being able to reconnect with people that are interested in the book when the book is actually printed. So,
wise words indeed. We've said a lot of times here on the podcast, because we have lots of aspiring authors that listen to the show. When you write your children's book, believe it or not, and I know you don't want to believe it because you think, I'm an artist, I'm a creative, I'm an author. But in reality, you are becoming the CEO of a small business. You're an entrepreneur. That is, if you want people to actually read your book, other than your immediate family.
You couldn't have said it better. And I think the hardest lesson for anybody who's self-publishing is learning the reality of once that book is printed, you've actually finished the easiest part of the process. Mm-hmm. Making those business relationships and getting out there and selling that book can be deflating for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And what Bookling Media has been doing is they will advocate for the book in a way that they're helping you. I mean, after all, I don't think I would have had the opportunity to talk to you if I hadn't had a partner in that out there advocating for this process. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm hoping that she's spearheading a new movement in this industry because there are so many stories that are worth hearing. And when you don't have a giant corporation behind you, how do you do that? How do you suddenly learn that vertical learning curve of how to market yourself? Yeah. You know, you do need partners. And on a smaller level, when you have smaller institutions, and partners that already know the industry that are out there saying, hey, we want to make your picture book. I want to support that 100%. I just think the business needs it. And you cannot beat the fact that when this book is done, I will still own these characters. I will own the opportunity to do whatever I want with them. Yeah. They just want an opportunity to tell that story in their medium.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the campaign itself. One of the things I love, and my family and I have been part of this, of different Kickstarter crowdfunding campaigns, a lot with music, is the idea that we as a family can be the decision maker. We can say, I like this project, and when it becomes a reality, kind of look at that music album, that picture book, and say, we helped make that happen.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think investment's really important, and I think in general the culture today is a good supporter of that idea. I mean, after all, social media is really about investment, right? It's getting to know who these personalities are, what they're working on. I mean, my Instagram is filled with artists. I want to know who else is in my community and what they're doing. And I feel completely a part of their world when I get to see their process. Kickstarter allows you to see material you would never see if you were going to a bookstore and just buying the book. Mm-hmm. You get to see behind the scenes material. You get to learn a little bit about the artist. And as you said, if you're a fan of the work, if you want to see a project happen, you're a shareholder in that process. Mm-hmm. And that's a great feeling. And there is more of a community that's built in a Kickstarter campaign than anything that I ever worked on in my previous career. So there's something to be said about that. I think it's a valuable tool in terms of getting people feeling like they're a part of the process. And plus, you get all those goodies, all those tiers of, here's some, I get to do an art print that I could potentially give to someone, or we have a tier in the Kickstarter where you could actually get drawn in the book. I want to draw people in the book. I would be, really excited about that. So that's not going to happen at a random house or.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it. And I think it's a great way and a very tangible way to show our kids that they can make a difference in the world.
Geez, I didn't even really think about that, but you're absolutely right. It makes the world of storytelling a possibility. It creates a path that says, well, I could do that. Yeah. And I think that's an excellent point. I think it makes, by putting those tools out in front of them, it says, well, I could do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Float, to see the great trailer that you've created and the tiers that you mentioned, and to decide, yes, I want to be a part of this.
Well, first of all, I invite everybody to go to Kickstarter. You can either do a search for the word Float and find us, but we have been lucky enough to be selected by Kickstarter as one of the projects that they love. So we are actually right on the home page. We are doing this campaign until March 6th, so there's only a couple more days left to do this, and I'm hoping that people check it out. We have put a wonderful video up there, and anybody who is interested in the world of kids that cause a little chaos, then I invite you to come because those are the criteria for some of my favorite stories. So.
Awesome. So we want people to go to Kickstarter.com, and then if you don't see it right away pop up on the homepage, just search Float on that website, and they will be connected with the campaign.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can go to booklingmedia.com, and you can always visit me on Instagram at Larry Daley Art and check out some of the crazy videos that I've put up there to promote this book, including me interviewing a seagull. So,
well, we want to check that out, and we want to encourage everybody to check out the campaign, and we can't wait for Float to become a reality. Our guest today has been Larry Daley. Larry, thanks so much for being with us.
Daley, thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Until then, please be sure to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Reading With Your Kids on TikTok, and at Gently Magic on Twitter. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can sign up for our free online magazine. You can also check out our blog, and there is a way you can contact the show. Let us know what you love about the show. Let us know what we could be doing better. And let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our amazing guests and sponsors. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Skylar Strauss, Kyoko Ito, Nicholas Warner, Kristen Barrett, Kayla Newland, Hannah Rose, Sydney Swan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.